Welcome! I'm Johan Nilsson.
And I'm Lincoln Murphy, and this is Impact Weekly.
We're here to help you make your customers successful. Each week, we answer your most pressing customer success management questions by relying on our years of experience with companies around the world.
Let's get this going.
Hey, this is Lincoln. Welcome to the first Impact Weekly episode of 2024. Since our first Impact Academy program of 2024 is our 2-week onboarding course that starts on January 22nd, the next few podcast episodes will be all about customer onboarding. For this week, we're sharing a recording I made for the last onboarding cohort where I answered their questions. I do this for every program we offer. No question goes unanswered. The onboarding questions from the participants in our program are fantastic, and my answers are, if I do say so myself, super valuable. I hope you would join us on January 22nd for our onboarding program at Impact Academy, but for now, enjoy this week's episode. Our company used to separate sales, onboarding, and CSM roles, causing a client CSM disconnect during onboarding. Now we're engaging the CSM to manage comms during onboarding, supported by an onboarding specialist. That's this person's role. Is this new model better? The main driver of separating roles is capacity. That's the main thing. But the main issue with hurting the customer's experience isn't about the structure of the org. It's about where we drop the ball in communication handoff. What we've done here is we've said, instead of handing off from sales to onboarding to CSM, now the CSM is basically going to run point with the customer and is going to communicate with the onboarding specialist. There's still the opportunity for the ball to be dropped. There's still a need for data to be centralized. There's still a need for communication to be efficient and consistent. Where I would see an issue here is, unless those things are solved, it doesn't really matter who's running point with the customer, who's involved with the customer at any one time. Those things aren't solved. We're still going to have the same issues. And then it's going to fail. And then we're going to try to find a different structure when it's not the structure of the organization as much as those other things that are at play here. And so that would be my main issue. So one isn't better than the other from a capacity standpoint. If the CSM is running point with the customers during onboarding, that may in some ways negate some of the gains in efficiency brought on by having an onboarding specialist. It's certainly not going to negate all of it. You're still offloading some of that work to an onboarding specialist, but the CSM still has to be involved. So there's going to be some person hours associated with that, which kind of defeats the purpose and to some extent, not all of it. One isn't better than the other. I just worry that the symptoms that caused the first structure to fail, that caused the change, unless those are actually, it's not the symptoms, it's the underlying disease that caused that original structure to fail could also cause this structure to fail. So I would make sure we're looking at those things the right way. How do we get clients to cooperate with us during onboarding so that they respond to the onboarding specialist? We talked about joint accountability. That's huge. It's very simple. Don't overthink it. We just have to have understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, have a plan, and get that agreement. And then we'll talk about goal discovery next week in week 2, where we can just supercharge the whole thing by really understanding what they're trying to accomplish, their objective in the time frame, but also the why. And we'll go into all about all that. So just stick with us there. But I think hopefully just joint accountability answered this question. Any suggestions on how to add enough value in the kickoff call to keep customers engaged and prevent them from dropping off? Look, what's in it for them? Customers that disengage, that ghost us, or that never really engage to begin with, they are being taken out of a what's in it for them environment, which is sales. And now it's about our product and us. Just make sure the main check for everything you're doing is, am I clear about what's in it for them? Or am I making this all about me, all about our product, all about everything except the customer? And that's the main thing. What should not be missing in the first invitation mail to the onboarding meeting? It's what I just said, only this time it's in an email. Make sure you are very clear about why this is important. Make sure you're very clear about what we're going to talk about, what we're going to do, and make sure that those things are very much customer focused. A good check is this email written in a way that another human would want to receive? Is it trying to do too much? Is it clear? Very often horrible emails, just horrible. And then we say, oh, email doesn't work. No, email works. You just wrote a really bad email that talked about all the things except what's in it for them. So the main thing is what's in it for the customer. Why should they attend this meeting? That's it. Then you can link to an agenda, or you can say, I'll follow up with an agenda, but make sure this is on your calendar, because I want to make sure you're set up to reach, and you would not use generic terms here, but you would say, because I want to make sure that we get you set up to hit that objective in this time frame, so that whatever their why is, and say it in a way a human would say that to another human, not robots and templates. We can use templates. I'm not saying templates are bad. I'm just saying the template should be written like how humans speak. Do you think it's beneficial to have someone dedicated to onboarding to then pass off to customer success, or do you think it's best to keep it with the CSM who will be taking on the client? I've already talked about that, and this was one I probably could have left out. But capacity planning is the main driver of having dedicated or having onboarding specialist role carved out. Again, it's always possible and figure it out for yourself to know whether or not this applies. But generally speaking, that's not really going to come down to a customer preference. Like, they don't really care. If you ask them, they might say, no, I want to work with the CSM the whole time. I want to work with this one person the whole time. Ask them that. But what they're really saying generally is, no, I don't want to be passed off from one person to another because I don't want to repeat myself. Nobody likes that. In fact, customers hate that. They also hate surprises and unknowns. So if they don't know that, if they think the onboarding person is who they're going to work with for the rest of their time with us, and then we surprise them with a CSM, that just invokes all sorts of negative emotions and stuff. So manage expectations, communicate properly, and do what will allow you to provide the customer with their appropriate experience. But generally speaking, having a dedicated onboarding person versus having a CSM, that's not something we usually see as being one way or the other part of the customer's appropriate experience. But what can hurt the experience is when things fall through the cracks and the customer has to repeat themselves and they don't know what's going on and they're surprised and all. How do you get clients to consume a video manual as part of the onboarding? Can we base our recommended steps that the client needs to do to onboard on that? Yeah. If this is part of their onboarding process, we have this video that we want you to watch, and we're going to have a meeting. The prerequisite for attending the meeting is that you watch that video. We're not going to watch it together. Did you watch the video? Yes. Okay, cool. We can have the meeting. Did you not watch the video? Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have to reschedule this meeting, and I need you to watch that video. You can't watch it together. That's not what this meeting's for. So make sure that you watch that. We'll reschedule. We should be fine in terms of timing, but if this happens too much, it's going to throw off your timing, and I need to make sure that you're on the right path to hitting your goal. If you just say, oh, it's fine, or we'll watch it together or something, then you've lost your positioning. And this is joint accountability. You agreed to do this. You said you would do what was necessary. You knew that this video needed to be watched. I said to make sure this happens, make sure you set aside time on your calendar to watch that video. It's super important. And if they didn't, then they didn't hold up their end. And we need to make sure that we hold them accountable to that. And we don't just let them get away with that kind of stuff, because then it starts to hurt us. But it also hurts them because now they're going to be off pace. We're never trying to be aggressive with our customers at all, but we do sometimes need to be assertive. And assertive is the difference between assertive and aggressive is telling a customer what to do and not taking into consideration their feelings, the reality that they live in, basically not having empathy. Assertiveness is telling the customer what to do, but having empathy. I'm not being a jerk. I'm just telling you, here are the things that we need to do to ensure your success. We both have things that we're doing. These are the things you need to do. If you don't do those things, then it's going to throw you off pace. We're okay right now, but go watch that video. We'll reschedule for a couple days from now. And they get the message pretty quickly. But if you let them get away with it, you let those things slip, all of a sudden they're not really holding up their end of the bargain because they don't need to, because you're not holding them accountable. And then at some point, it's not going to work out well for them. So we need to make sure that we're setting those boundaries and we're being assertive, not aggressive, but assertive in maintaining that. If it's just part of joint accountability, if we're just saying this is something you need to do on your own, and if you don't, we can't have our call. That's it. The call is meant to review your progress, to answer any questions, and to set up next steps. Our call is not to do the stuff that you needed to do on your own. Make sense? Ideas or best practices on how to effectively communicate planning, responsibility, milestones during onboarding without making the customer feel overwhelmed or overloaded with information. Give them a big picture, 30, 60, 90 days, high level, break down the first week. Not even that much detail. And then from there, just try to get them from where they are to whatever the next step is. I say in the pre-recorded content, don't try to boil the ocean, just make little cups of tea along the way. We want to give them an idea of what to expect, big picture. To your point, we don't want to overwhelm or overload them, but they need to have an understanding where we're going. So 30, 60, 90 days, whatever, just a number, whatever works. Give them that idea. And you could say, by the way, we have a goal to get our customers on board in 45 days. It won't make or break anything, but that's our goal. And that totally fits within your time frame for achieving your goals. So let's try to make that happen. That's fine. And then saying, here are the things we're going to need to accomplish in that time. And here are the things we need to accomplish in this first week. And that could be more granular. And then from there, we continue to roll out more granular details on a week by week basis or whatever works. But basically, that's a good point. We don't want to give them, that 30, 60, 90 day plan that's super detailed and just completely overwhelmed. They're not going to pay attention to that, but we want to give them some idea and then some detail. How should we manage the onboarding process if the company goal and commitments change during the onboarding? For example, stakeholder change. I love this. Hopefully that's not happening too much. Not because it's a problem, but because if that's happening too much, then we need to go back and look at how we're initially gathering information, how we're initially doing our goal discovery. So it's not that companies won't change their goals. That happens all the time. In fact, we talk about goal discovery. We understand what the customer is trying to achieve, their objective and their time frame. At some point, their objective might change. Their time frame might change. They might add a new objective on top of that, stack their goals. That's just the nature of nothing is static. But if this is happening enough where this isn't just an edge case, then I would suggest moving upstream to figure out what are we not doing correctly. And so our goal discovery framework next week should really help here. But again, just go back and say, what are we missing? Why is this happening a lot? Now, if this is an edge case or just something that not necessarily an edge case, but certainly not something that happens all the time, then just be prepared for that. And basically what we're going to say to the customer is, if these changes are happening, number one, let us know as soon as possible. So stakeholder changes are something where if it's our primary stakeholder, we might not find out because they disappeared. That's why we want to also have an emergency backup or emergency contact or other people on their side that we can reach out to if possible. But aside from the person that our main point of contact changing and disappearing, just if anything else changes, we want to let them know. Let us know this is going to happen as soon as possible. Or I don't want to find out something happened 2 weeks ago that was a showstopper that's caused all of your progress to stop or slow down. And that happens, unfortunately. So where we can mitigate that is in managing expectations and giving them permission to let us know these things are happening as soon as possible. So anytime you're like, we have a meeting in a couple of weeks. I don't know if you'd want to go that long between meetings and onboarding in a couple of weeks. Anything comes up between now and then that is a showstopper or even just a question, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know. I want to know. I'd rather know sooner rather than later that something's happening so I can help you get back on track, help to make sure that you're getting everything done as efficiently as possible. So I think the main thing is if this is if we're having to change things up frequently enough that this is an issue, then we need to look and make sure that we're doing things right upstream. It's also possible that maybe you're working in an environment where that kind of stuff is just going to happen. So in that case, that's just the reality that you're working in. So you have to just maintain that level of flexibility, but probably not. And again, probably in onboarding, it's even with the more complex onboarding and it being 60, 90 days, like even in that, you shouldn't be dealing with a lot of change unless you missed something, at least for most of your customers. So that's what I would look at this and say, what's going on here? What could we fix upstream to make sure this isn't an issue? And then just, if it is an issue, stop everything and say, all right, let's regroup here. New stakeholders, new point of contact, new goal. All right. Now the goal that we were working towards, the objective and the time frame, that's changed. So that means our timetable has changed. If it's something that's moved up, we have to be realistic. Unless we do something dramatic, like maybe you pay for some professional services to do a lot of this work for you or whatever, unless you do something dramatic, you're not going to hit that objective in that time frame. Or it extends it, and now we have more time, so we have a little bit of room. But this goes back to communication and managing expectations and being as transparent as possible in the entire process. But really good question. How should the transfer between onboarding and adoption go? What we need to make sure to cover, etc. If the transfer from onboarding to adoption is, if you're the CSM and you're handling it all, there's not a lot we really need to do. It's just, you're saying, all right, they're out of onboarding. We're probably going to move it into breadth adoption. Now our measure of success has changed to getting everybody that has a license assigned to them, getting them into the system and getting them up and running, whatever that means. And then at some point, we're going to transition them out of breadth adoption and move into depth adoption. If it's an onboarding person to the CSM, then again, most everything should be in the centralized somewhere on the customer record, whether that's CRM or a CSM tool or a combination of both of those things. There's going to be additional context that maybe the onboarding specialist has that isn't in. Is it just like the salesperson had context that wasn't in the structured data? The onboarding specialist may have picked up on some things that's not in the structured data. They might put it in the notes, but we would also want them to go ahead and share that with the CSM. But there's one other thing that's really powerful, is that during onboarding, the onboarding specialist can really set the CSM up for success from the customers with the customers, to really talk about what the CSM is going to do with them. In onboarding, I'm really here to make sure that we work through the technical, administrative, and functional aspects of getting you up and running. The CSM is going to take over, and we would probably name them, whoever your CSM. As soon as we're done with onboarding, they're going to take over, and they're going to be the ones, them or one of, should anything happen, one of their equally qualified teammates will take over, and they're going to work with you from then on. They might bring other specialists in from time to time, but they're going to be the main person that you work with, and tend not to want to say that they're going to be your main point of contact, because then it feels like everything needs to go through them, when in fact things need to go to support or they need to go other places. But they're going to be the ones that are going to work with you, but they're going to work with you to make sure you're reaching your business goals. So while we were technical, functional focused here and administrative, they're the ones that are going to really take you and help you achieve those goals that we set out to achieve when you first came into onboarding. So you're positioning the CSM as something more strategically valuable. And that's a really awesome opportunity that you have in onboarding, and that you have with an onboarding specialist, that they can really position the CSM. If you're the CSM doing all of this, you have to work to position yourself that way. Hey, we're focused right now on these things. And yeah, some of this is technical, some of this is administrative and functional. But as soon as you're done with onboarding, I want you to think of me different. My role shifts. Now I'm here to make sure that you get up and running from a business standpoint, that we're on track to hit your business goals. So making that positional change, it's a little bit more difficult if you're the CSM doing both of those things. It's not impossible at all. You just have to be much more deliberate about it. Because even if the onboarding specialist does a poor job or doesn't at all position you properly as the CSM, you can actually position yourself because you can say the onboarding specialist, that was their focus. And this is what I do. So even if the onboarding specialist doesn't position you, you have that opportunity to take ownership of what you really do and use that juxtaposition with the onboarding specialist to do that. Ideally, the onboarding specialist positions you so that when the customer comes to start working with you, they're excited to work with you because you're the one that's going to help them achieve their business goals. Can you give me examples of what to focus on QBRs for each lifecycle stage? I think you probably should be doing QBRs during onboarding. Probably shouldn't be doing QBRs during adoption. You probably shouldn't be doing QBRs close to renewal. If you are, then it's going to be a thinly veiled renewal discussion. QBRs during the engagement phase is probably more likely. Probably something you're going to do on a quarterly basis, hence QBR. It's a business review. It's a review of how using our product has affected your business, has affected the goals, and then how it's going to do so going forward. So it's really review and planning. But I'm sure that there are examples of times when you could do a QBR during some of those things when I said you shouldn't. But generally speaking, if we're going to do QBRs, probably going to be during that ongoing engagement. It needs to be very much focused on their business and how our product helps them achieve that. An account review, which is much more about our account with them and their use and usage and all of that stuff. And it's not a routine meeting, which is just all the other meetings that we have with our customers. It's very special, very specific. And also, you don't have to do QBRs. There's no requirement in customer success to actually do QBRs. But that's outside the scope of onboarding, but just don't have to do QBRs. If you have QBRs come from a time when we didn't have an ongoing engagement with our customers, really, we didn't have a lot of visibility into what they were doing. We weren't talking to them frequently across multiple channels. They were literally a quarterly check-in with the customer, which is also why they weren't super valuable. It shouldn't be a check-in. It's really, okay, so this is what you did. We know this. We're really just stating this is what you did. Now let's figure out what we're going to do going forward. But it's strategic, it's high level, it's business focused. What about further requirements that come up during the onboarding process? We need to stick to the user's understanding the product and the value. But what if they request further enhancements, additions? We covered this already. If this is happening a lot, then we need to go back to move upstream and figure out, are we not doing enough in our goal discovery, in our turnover from sales to make sure that we are uncovering all of this initially? So if this is happening a lot later on, it's really indicative of the fact that we're not doing this earlier. If it's happening a lot and we know that we've gone back and we've looked and we're doing all of that, then is onboarding going on too long? They're not really in onboarding anymore. They're on to depth adoption and they're starting to do new things. Okay, they're long out of onboarding. We just didn't really have a clear delineation of the life cycle stages. But I think the main thing is, if this is happening a lot, it's either because something's wrong or you work in an environment where we need to just be open to that level of flexibility because this is just the nature of the game. And it's going to be more difficult to scale and all that stuff, but it is what it is. But I suspect it's probably something earlier in the life cycle stage of onboarding where we're not gathering all of this ahead of time. And so these things are coming up later when they should have come up initially. Should we give the clients onboarding lists, all the actions that are usually needed so they can go do this stuff by themselves? Talked about this earlier. We don't want to overwhelm, but yeah, if it makes sense to just lay this out for them, do so. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't want to overwhelm, but there's nothing wrong with managing expectations. And there's certainly nothing wrong with giving them a list of stuff that they need to do if it makes sense. How do we know if it makes sense? Sometimes we just have to try it. If it's very clear, because we know our customers that wouldn't fly culturally or for some other reason, then don't do it. But if you think it's a good idea and you want to try it with a few customers, see how it works. And I think you'll be surprised how well communicating with your customers works. Should we record our sessions with our clients? Yes. How do we get the team on board with the idea? Just make sure that make sure that this is true. This isn't about micromanaging, but how can I coach you? If I'm the head of customer success, how can I coach you if I can't see what you're doing. Do you want me to sit in on the call with you? By the way, you don't want to do, because everybody will act different if the boss is there. But yeah, we can so much intel that we can gain from those calls from a coaching standpoint internally, but also it's an asset that we can share with the client. So when the client says, hey, I don't remember how to do this thing, instead of answering the question, you can say, hey, I sent you the video of our call. And I think it was about the 10-minute mark. So go back and watch that. We go over that and then let me know if you have any questions. So now I'm leveraging an async asset that was based on a synchronous conversation that we had. And that's awesome. So yes, record your calls, but then actually do something with them. And there's tools like Gong and others that will actually allow you to analyze your calls. Some AI assistants out there, Otter.ai is one, but Gong is really probably the best one in terms of it's made for sales intelligence, but we can use it for customer success as well. But yes, record the calls and whatever make sure everything's cool with your customer and everybody involved. But in terms of getting your team on board, this isn't about micromanaging. This is about making sure that we have that asset we can share with our customers. And then from a coaching standpoint, and what we cover in the head of customer success, the session actually that just passed was our head of customer success, how to build. And we go into coaching and using call recordings to coach our team members. It's such a valuable asset for everybody involved, from the head of customer success to the CSM to the customer themselves. We should definitely be recording our calls. In the pre-recorded videos, you talked about the end of the onboarding stage needs to include first value realization. How do I, as a CSM, know when this customer has reached this? As the CSM or as the onboarding specialist, you don't need to know when the customer has themselves realized first value. That's something that we've all agreed on, or that ops or enablement or the head of customer success has laid out and attached it to, a very specific progress milestone. Progress milestone that we have said when they reach this, they're on board, is because that's the place where for most of our customers, we feel like they're going to realize first value. Okay. As the CSM or the onboarding specialist, you don't have to figure out whether they've realized first value. You can validate that if you want and if you need to, but what we need to do is just say they've achieved this progress milestone. Now they're on board. Somebody else needs to worry about whether that progress milestone actually attaches to first value realization. So finally, should we put a limit on the hours that we are spending with the client? My company is afraid of giving out too much free consulting, so we put a limit of 5 hours, and anything above that, they have to pay for it. I would say that's fine as long as we're looking at consulting as, well, consulting. If you're going to limit the time spent in onboarding outside of stuff that is very specific to that customer, just be careful that you're not ending up putting such a limit on it that you're not really onboarding the customer. But what we're talking about here probably is actual consultative work, some consulting, professional services, maybe integrations, whatever. Those things are specific to the customer. They're necessarily extra. So yes, look, in onboarding, we work you through this process. That's all included. And we even throw in 5 hours of professional services work. And that should be plenty for the things that you need done. Or we throw in 5 hours of professional services work for the things that you need to do. We're probably looking at 10 to 15 hours. Do you have the budget for 10 extra hours of professional services work at this hourly rate? And if they don't, then they're probably not going to be successful. So we need to be really clear about that. And that probably needs to come up in the sales process. So that's something to think about there. But to me, it's not about spending too much time in onboarding. Usually it's about this very specific aspect of consultative approach to things, professional services, integrations, custom development, what have you. That stuff, that's fine to include a certain number of free hours and then to charge extra for it. But make sure everybody knows about it.
All right. I hope you enjoyed those questions and ideally my answers. I also hope you'll join us on January 22nd for our onboarding program at Impact Academy. You can find a link to sign up in the show notes. See you there.
Hey, thanks for listening. Do you want to bring your customer success to the next level? Check out Impact Academy. We have training programs for customer success managers and for leaders in customer success.